Why not invest like the best? And I'm talking about Warren Buffett, who bought his first stock at the age of 11 in 1941. At the age of 15, he was said to have a net worth of $6,000. Way back then, though, that was worth a lot of money. Then, over the next 70 years, the Oracle of Omaha has used his investing prowess to accumulate a fortune estimated at about $84 billion to make him the world's third richest person. But Warren Buffett's also become a legend amongst investors, not just because of his success, but because how seemingly simplistic he makes investment, and his philosophy is often used in his quotes. In fact, he's earned the reputation of making investments seem easy because of his many insightful quotes. And that's what we're going to look at today in this week's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, where we dissect some of his quotes. And while they tend to relate to shares, we're going to see how it could affect you in all areas of your life, and in particular with regard to property investment. So welcome to this week's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's most trusted property commentator, who has once again been voted Australia's leading property investment advisor. That's the fifth time he's won a similar award in the last 7 years.
Warren Buffett's often been called the Oracle of Omaha because he's a font of investment wisdom. He's perhaps the most successful investor in history and clearly one of the wealthiest people in the world today. So I bet we can learn some lessons from him, and that's what I want to do in today's show. So I'd like to go through some of his famous quotes with Ahmed Imam, Director of Metropole Properties in Sydney. Good morning, Ahmed.
Morning, Michael. How are you?
Good.
We've got 19 life-changing lessons from Warren Buffett, and I thought it'd be great if we can dissect them and just start to go through them one by one.
Why not?
Perfect. Well, why don't we start from the very beginning? The first one is risk comes from not knowing what you're doing.
Well, that's really interesting because it is as relevant in the property market as it is in the share market, which is what Warren Buffett's talking about. Many investors think they understand about the property market because they know a little bit about the home that they've lived in or interest rates, but that's a risk because they don't understand the nuances of what creates property markets to move, to change, to what drives property markets. There's a vast difference between what they think is risk and what really is the risk. Often the biggest risk is themselves, because there's 25 million property experts in Australia. Everyone seems to think they know a bit about property, but that's not really the truth. There's a big difference between researching on the internet and reading books and going to seminars and actually understanding the fundamentals of the property market. So in my mind, you can minimize risk by surrounding yourself with the right sort of people, by getting advisors, by getting mentors.
Spot on. And I think there's a big difference between risk and calculated risk. You know, if I want risk, I'll head to the casino, I'll put my money on red or black. If I want calculated risk, I'll put my money on a proven investment grade asset. So there is indeed a big difference there.
Well, that's actually true because you actually do have to take an element of risk. A bigger risk, in my mind, is actually not doing anything and waiting, depending upon the government to look after you in your old age.
Well said. Okay, quote number 2. Should you find yourself in a chronically leaking boat, energy devoted to changing vessels is likely to be more productive than energy devoted to patching leaks.
Hey, again, a good quote that is well translated into property because many investors don't review their property portfolio. Others don't recognise how their poor investments are costing them money. How often do you sit in front of somebody, Ahmed, and they say, well, it's actually not costing me anything?
Oh, nearly every single day, Michael.
But it is.
It's costing them an opportunity cost. Absolutely.
So what they should be doing is having a look at what their property portfolio is like today and asking them the questions like, knowing what I know now, would I buy that property again? how is it performing? How could I make it perform better? Is it performing like I'd expect it to? And sometimes you actually have to make that hard decision of changing vessels, as Warren Buffett said. And sure, that comes at a cost. It comes at the cost of maybe paying some capital gains tax, paying agents' fees to sell your property, paying stamp duty to buy the next one. But if you can only own 3 or 4 investment properties, shouldn't you be owning the best ones, the ones that are working at wealth-producing rates of return?
Couldn't agree more. And it actually reminds me of a quote, and that is, don't hold on to a mistake just because you spent a long time making it. And I think that's where a lot of investors fall over.
Well, that's one of the psychological biases we have. We invest so much time, money, effort, and emotion into our investments that we can't see them clearly. So when you do your review, do it with somebody independent, somebody who's not as involved.
Perfect. Next one. It is not necessary to do extraordinary things to get extraordinary results.
Yeah, people think they've got to do something special. Property investment's simple. Now, it's not easy. Now, that's not really a play on words, but buying a high-growth quality asset and holding it for the long term, using our top-down approach that we've discussed often on this podcast, using my 6-stranded strategic approach, works. The trouble is my system is too simple for many intelligent people, and they look for doing something extraordinary, something different, or they only take bits of it and then say, hey, it doesn't work, when no, it's not. You actually haven't followed the whole system. Others actually delay their investing because they think they've got to understand how everything works. You'll never get it all right. The circumstances will never be 100% right. The timing will never be perfect.
Yeah, the quote is accurate for lots of aspects of life. I mean, you don't have to do an extraordinary amount of exercise to improve your health, and nor do you have to be an extraordinarily gifted athlete to get started. You know, you don't have to be an extraordinarily attractive or have an extraordinary game to ask, that cute girl or boy out and find extraordinary love. To get extraordinary results, you just have to do a lot of normal things in the right direction. It's really that simple.
And keep doing them. Don't give up.
That's right. The next one, Michael, after all, you only find out who is swimming naked when the tide goes out.
Well, that follows on from one of his other quotes, doesn't it? A rising tide lifts all ships. And you only find out who's swimming naked when the tide goes out, because currently, as the property market has turned, we're finding that investors who did the wrong thing are getting in trouble. For example, all those who bought off the plan. I read some scary statistics recently about the very, very large percentage of people who bought properties off the plan, apartments off the plan, even up to 10 years ago, who's in the last decade haven't made any capital growth. And the fact that almost half the apartments currently settling off the plan at the moment are being valued below contract price. So you've got to have a system, a property strategy that's known, proven, trusted, and that's worked in all markets, that's always worked, not just looking for something that's working now, Ahmed.
Yeah, that's right. And this is one of my favorite quotes, Michael, and I think it's also very timely, as you mentioned. I'm seeing many people swimming naked now, that we're no longer experiencing the double-digit growth that we saw in Sydney, Melbourne over the last 5, 6, 7 years. So you have to have that strategy in play that is long-lasting and works through the different markets.
Well, the other thing we're seeing is a lot of the property spruikers and the people selling off the plan and house and land, and was the pure house of cards about to fall down anyway, and we're seeing that happening at the moment, aren't we?
We certainly are. Okay, the next one, Michael, price is what you pay, value is what you get.
Well, that's in all areas of life, isn't it? So therefore, people judge things on how much is it going to cost me rather than what is it going to make me? And it's not just in the areas of advice, and it's not just in the areas of using people like the team at Metropole as property strategists and buyer's agents. I see it in people who are trying to sell their house, and so they actually get the agent who charges the cheapest fee. There's those 0.5% people in purple bricks, etc. But the selling agent who costs you the least is actually the one that gets you the highest price, not the one that charges the lowest commission.
It explains how poor people spend more money on things over time than rich people, because rich people can spend more upfront for things of better quality that last longer. Poor people have to buy the cheapest option available, and those cheap options have to be replaced more often than better quality ones. You'll always get what you pay for, Michael, and the thing is, you can't skimp on the important stuff. If you want to skimp on something, you can skimp on how much you spend on toothpaste, but when it comes to property, which is likely to be the most expensive transaction, you want to make sure that you're putting your funds in the right direction and you are in fact getting that value.
Well, a cheap property today, a secondary property today, is almost likely going to be a secondary property in 5 years' time. So you're 100% right. Look, during a boom, everything went up in value. People bought properties on main roads and in those high-rise towers. But now that the market's turned, now that the tide's gone out, there's a flight to quality. So 100% right. I don't think I've ever bought what I thought was a bargain. Well, that's actually not true. Where I'm actually standing today, you can't see me, Ahmed, because you're in Sydney and I'm in Melbourne, at my home, was at the time it seemed expensive, but I guess in retrospect was a bargain just because of the time and the cycle. But I don't go out looking for bargains. I look at for buying good properties at a fair price that's going to outperform in the long term.
Yeah, spot on. And I think you touched on it right there, at a fair price. I mean, if you know it's going to be a long-term performer for you, we're happy to pay a fair price for that. Okay, next one, Michael. It's far better to buy a wonderful company at a fair price than a fair company at a wonderful price.
Boy, isn't that appropriate from the comment you made just a moment ago? So Warren Buffett said what you said. He must have heard you, Ahmed, because he's talking about companies. We're saying that it's better to buy good quality properties or investments and not look for cheap or bargains, because it's a very informed market out there. There's no real way of getting something way, way below market price, because if it is, then it's likely that there's something you're missing. On the other hand, at Metropole being Australia's largest buyers agents, we definitely get opportunity to get off-market properties and get an inside foot or get in early. So there are still advantages.
Perfect. The investor of today does not profit from yesterday's growth. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, he's talking about the share market, but similarly for the property market. So at Metropole, we look for leading indicators rather than lagging indicators. We don't just look at what's happened in the past, what auction clearance rates have been, what past capital growth has been. We look for what's going to make capital growth and rental growth and scarcity occur in the future by looking for areas that there's economic growth, areas where there's wages growth, areas where there's gentrification, areas where people have got higher disposable income so they can spend more. Now, an extreme example of this, of course, is looking at the extraordinary growth in mining towns or Perth and Darwin. And if you would have looked in the rearview mirror 5 years ago and bought in then, boy, would you have been in trouble. And you know what? I think we're going to say much the same about Hobart in a couple of years' time.
I don't disagree with that at all. Next one, it's better to hang out with people better than you. Pick out associates whose behavior is better than yours and you'll drift in that direction.
Well, you've heard me say it before, if you're the smartest person in your team, you're in trouble. So the people you hang out with are important. That's why you need mentors. That's why you need a mastermind group. That's why you need people who think positively around you. So if you're a cyclist and you ride the bike every Sunday and you wear lycra, you're probably hanging out with people that are like that, and you're probably going to hang out with people who are fit and who drive you to physical fitness. The same with money or in other areas of your life as well, Ahmed.
That's right, Michael. And I know that's why you like spending so much time with me. Okay, moving on to the next one. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently.
That's interesting. And while it doesn't relate to property, I believe it relates to how you deal with other people, how you treat your customers, your clients, your loved ones, and your staff and your team members as well. So I know it's one of the ways we run our business at Metropole, you and I. And I think it's something that's just ingrained in our culture.
Yeah. Of the billionaires I have known, money just brings out the basic traits in them. If they were jerks before they had money, they are simply jerks with $1 billion.
I'm not sure what else I can say about that, Ahmed. That money doesn't change you. People think, oh, when I'm rich, I'm going to give to charity. When I'm rich, I'll be nicer. It doesn't work that way. You are what you are, and money will accentuate it.
Yeah, spot on. Next one. If you get to my age in life and nobody thinks well of you, I don't care how big your bank account is, your life is a disaster.
You've probably read some of the blogs on Property Update about the biggest regrets people have when they die. And it's not that they didn't spend more time at work. It's not that they didn't buy another property in their portfolio or they got more money in the bank account, but it's regrets about what they haven't done with their loved ones, their family, and the experiences they've had. So no, don't let money drive you. It's not going to give you what you need. Money's really important in those areas where it's important, but it's not at all important in other areas of your life, is it, Ahmed?
No, not at all. And it goes back to a phrase that I hear used all the time, and that is, real wealth is what you have left over when you take money away. And I think that truly resonates.
Good point.
Next one. I don't look to jump over 7-foot bars. I look around for 1-foot bars that I can step over.
We can take that in a couple of ways, Ahmed. If something seems hard, find something that's easier to do. Or maybe you could say, if something seems hard, break it down into smaller pieces. So I'm not suggesting don't go for the hard tasks. Most Australians don't achieve what they deserve, not because they aim too high and don't get it. It's because they aim too low and achieve it. So I like to actually just do things bit by bit, chunk by chunk, knowing that if you improve yourself 1% each day over a period of time, you're going to change dramatically, whether it's your eating habits, whether it's exercise, or in the areas we're talking about with your money habits. So it's important to get good money habits, and you won't change all your habits straight away. You've often heard Tom Corley and me say that just change one, and then in a couple of months change another habit, and look back in a year and you'll be a different person.
Yeah. And this one really resonates with me. My favorite book, Michael, or one of my favorites, is The Richest Man in Babylon. And that's
hang on. One of my books isn't on your favorite list?
After yours, of course.
Okay.
I do enjoy employment. But The Richest Man in Babylon speaks of small incremental growth. So just as you mentioned, just doing one small thing very well every single day, and over time it does become a big thing. And I think property investment is a perfect example of that. Next one, Michael. You only have to do very few things right in your life, so long as you don't do too many things wrong.
Well, Warren Buffett was talking about the share market, and you can't get it right all the time, but if you get the occasional one right, you do okay, as long as you don't make major losses. But it's the same in all other areas of your life too. No one can be good at everything, or not all the time anyway, and everyone makes mistakes. But if you're good at certain things, keep doing them and make your mistakes count. Learn from them. I've become an expert at failure. I've become a real success at failure, I've often said, because I learn from my mistakes, I correct them, I do things differently, and over time I do lots of things right and try not to get too many things wrong. And when I do get things wrong, I know that's just part of life and I've just got to do it differently next time.
Well said. Rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1.
Well, many people I see who think they're investors are actually speculators. You ask, well, why did you buy that property there? Or why are you considering doing that? And they say, oh, it's turn. It's that city's turn. It's that place's turn to come good. Or because I read a hot spotting report, they take unnecessary risks. And when I ask them, are you an investor or a speculator? They say, well, I'm an investor, but they're not. They're actually speculating. So rule number 1 is never lose money. So rather than look for the hotspot, rather than look for the thing that's working now because the market is different and because the climate is different, because finance is different, look for something that's always worked and you're unlikely to go wrong, Ahmed.
Agreed. Speculation, in my opinion, is just another word for gambling. It truly is, and there's no room for that in successful investing.
Makes sense.
The next one, Michael. I will tell you how to become rich. Close the doors. Be fearful when others are greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful.
Well, I guess that means you should invest counter-cyclically. And I took that very literally when I first started investing, and I've recognized that while it is useful, in property it's actually very difficult to invest counter-cyclically, but because sometimes, like now when the market is flatter and there's great opportunities, it's harder to get finance or you're already maxed out with finance. So it doesn't only mean invest counter-cyclically, because if you can get it right, that's good. But the timing of the market's too hard. So it's best to own good assets and hold them in the long term. But what it means is that don't get scared when other people do. I know that you and I keep hearing every day from clients who are worried about what's going on, and they're thinking, I should sell up. They're currently scared by the noise, the fake news in the media. And it's really, really easy to say, I'll be greedy when others are fearful, and I'll be fearful when others are greedy. So easy to say it, but it's actually so hard to do because our emotions play havoc with us.
They certainly do. And I was speaking to a client just the other day, Michael, just about the wider investment journey. And we were speaking about these current times, how there is a lot of fear in the market and consumer confidence is low and market sentiment is low. But I said throughout your investment journey, whether it's the next, say, 15, 20 years, you're going to experience another 3 or 4 times like this. And the idea is that you just have to make sure you have the right buffers, ride through this wave, and just wait essentially for the right markets to rebound again. It is a long-term game.
Yes, it is. But psychologically, we're not wired that way. We're wired to go with the herd, because way back when we were cavemen, it was much better to stay with the herd and be safe than separate from the herd and get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. So it is hard to follow the herd, but we also know that the herd is generally wrong-armored.
Very interesting. Yeah, and indeed they are. Next one. Our favorite holding period is forever.
Well, Warren Buffett said if you can't hold a stock for 10 years, then don't own it at all. Don't own it for 10 minutes. But it's really the same with property. Residential real estate is a long-term game, and compounding and leverage makes it work better the longer you have it, and it's much more forgiving the longer you have it. So don't try and trade. Don't try and flip. I actually saw somebody only yesterday who was an estate agent, and she was telling me that she hasn't bought an investment property yet, but she's planning to get into it, but she's trying to buy properties to flip because that's what she's used to. That's what she sees. That's what she experiences with people buying and selling homes, and she's watched the block and she enjoys it. But I actually spoiled her fun by explaining to her that property flips tend to flop. So really, if you're not prepared to hold a property in the long term, don't buy it.
Yeah, that's right. And the only time I've ever heard you recommend selling a property is when it's an underperforming asset. Is that correct?
Correct. So while I say buy and never sell, that's not really true. It's buy and seldom sell, because I've made investment mistakes, and the properties I bought at the beginning of my career many years ago are not what I currently hold in my portfolio now. Other than my first one, which I've totally changed and built 2 townhouses on, because I was in a different circumstance then. I had different needs. I couldn't afford what I could afford today. So yes, sometimes you do have to trade up, and sometimes you've got to just get out.
Yeah. Next one, never invest in a business you cannot understand.
Well, Warren Buffett's talking about business, but this applies to all sorts of investing. So if somebody's talking to you about fractional property ownership or other weird things to try and get you in the market because you can't get in yourself, or options, or Airbnb, all these things you get in your inbox, run away very, very quickly. Don't try and be overly smart. Property investment, as I said, is simple if you stick to the rules.
Spot on. And I think this is very important in this current market as well. The next one, Michael, someone sitting in a shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago.
Well, who wouldn't like to buy the property their parents bought? I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago at the price their parents paid. But at the time, it was probably very expensive for them, and they had to bite off more they could chew and take on a mortgage and wonder how they pay it as well. So property is a long-term game, and only down the track are you going to see how attractive it is.
Perfect. Last but not least, diversification is a protection against ignorance. It makes very little sense for those who know what they're doing.
That's right. Now, property investors find it much harder to diversify because property is expensive and lumpy. So you could buy a number of different shares or managed funds. But once you buy your first property, it's really, really hard to get to the second one for a couple of years. And so it's a bit hard to diversify. I have found that my system allows me to buy similar properties. So my properties, interestingly, are in 5 different municipalities only. Why? Because they're ones that have outperformed in the long term and are going to keep outperforming over the long term. This is the residential properties. My commercial properties, to be fair, are actually in different municipalities because the rules are different for those. Commercial property, we should actually have a talk about that at some stage, Ahmed. But I've found that diversification leads to averageness. And averageness is bottom of the best and cream of the crap. That's not what I want. So successful investors don't put their eggs in different baskets. They put their eggs in one basket, but then they watch it very, very carefully.
Thank you, Michael. It's always great to get your insights and to pick your brain.
Sure. Well, I guess the bottom line I get from that is Warren Buffett's quotes make lots of common sense. Interestingly, Ahmed, he doesn't actually claim to be smarter than anyone else, even though he probably is. He just sticks to common sense and some core principles, and he uses those with his investment. You know what? I think we should all be a bit more like Warren Buffett.
Agreed.
Well, there you have it, some lessons from Warren Buffett. I always enjoy my chat with Ahmed. We have fun talking about these clever quotes. And if you enjoy that sort of information, do you subscribe to my daily newsletter, Property Update, propertyupdate.com.au, where you're going to get lots of information about success, money, and property investment. And if you've enjoyed this, tell somebody else about it as well. Let's spread the message and get as many people as possible financially fluent. And I particularly appreciate it when you leave nice reviews, such as the one I recently received from 81 Kizza on Apple Podcasts. And he left a 5-star review saying, "This podcast has helped me and my family immensely. It's given us the confidence to buy an investment property and start our journey to financial independence. Thank you, Michael, for sharing your knowledge with us." Well, thank you so much. That makes me so happy. I really appreciate that I'm getting the message out there and helping people. So keep me informed on how your journey's going. And because I read out your review, please email me at michael@metropole.com.au and I'd be happy to give you one of my books. And when I read out your review, I'll do the same. This podcast is now coming to you twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favorite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?